Preface. Since the original version of the Death of WCW was released, we have received countless emails and death threats. Thankfully, the former greatly outnumber the latter, and for that, we say thank you. What may have shocked us most during the last decade is yet our lack of correspondence regarding our original dedication. It simply read, "To Hunter and Steph." We thought that was a fairly clever, if somewhat subtle way to begin the proceedings back in 2004. Perhaps it was a bit too subtle. In short, yes, we were referencing Paul and Stephanie Levesque. That would be Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, the heirs apparent to Vince McMahon's cash cow known as World Wrestling Entertainment. In fact, the original layout of the Death of WCW was that of a handbook, a guide stating everything that a wrestling company could possibly do wrong, using WCW illustrations to prove the points. We thought if we penned a guideline of the exact items that killed WCW, it would guide future wrestling promoters and help them out. Of course, the layout of the book changed because, honestly, the original concept was kind of a mess and not very fun to read. Still, the basic issues that destroyed the company all made it in there. Make no mistake, we knew neither Hunter nor Steph would ever actually read the book. Still, we had hopes that someone within that company might, and perhaps, somehow, in some way, derive some wisdom from it that would help their company, as Vince McMahon morphed into rich Uncle Pennybags, having vanquished all realistic opposition in the pro wrestling industry. The past 10 years have shown us that didn't happen. While we are certain there are people within WWE who have read the book, they have taught those in charge very little about the demise of their largest competitor. Since 2004, WWE has made many of the same mistakes that led to WCW's downfall. Granted, there has been nowhere near the level of stupidity that we saw in Ted Turner's Wrastlin' Company, and honest to God, after reviewing and expanding the WCW 2000 chapter, that would be impossible. But still, lessons were there to be learned and were simply ignored. Due to ignoring the past, money has been lost. Money that will never be recovered. In short, they should have read the book, and not just because we dedicated it to them. But it's not just WWE. Amazingly, and most bafflingly, consider the fact that those who were at the helm of WCW during its colossal collapse have found new jobs. In the wrestling business, no less. Why wrestling companies would want to hitch their wagons to the horses that pulled WCW off a cliff is, quite frankly, baffling. A question that can never be answered. But that hasn't changed the fact that those in charge of TNA Impact Wrestling have decided to do just that. Whenever ECW Press calls us to ask what book we are going to write next, the answer is always the same. The Death of TNA. You could just change the letters WCW on the cover to TNA and reprint the rest. Oh, and don't forget to send us our royalty checks. Seriously, look at the front cover of the original Death of WCW. Who do you see? Vince Russo, Eric Bischoff, Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash. Who has been the head writer for TNA during the bulk of its existence? Russo. Who, when they saw that that wasn't working out, did they throw money at to come in and right the ship? Hogan and Bischoff. And what has the company garnered from Russo, Bischoff, and Hogan's years of said guidance? The same issues WCW had and the same result. Losses of millions of dollars. All of that plus a never-ending string of 1.1 television ratings and a whole heapin' helpin' of stupidity that was so plentiful, we decided to add in a listing of it at the end of this book. However, as we're sure they won't bother to learn from history either, we're going to try to go one step further and note the same mistakes both WWE and TNA have made that WCW did years prior. To be sure that no one can miss this, we are not so subtly tagging these sections with bold lessons not learned. We've also added a ton of quotes from those who saw WCW implode just to shut up all the people who mistakenly thought we wrote about what happened without knowing folks behind the scenes. Additionally, you'll find other items and notes that weren't in the original version of the book. Finally, and most importantly, we're changing our dedication. Instead of to Hunter and Steph, this book will be dedicated to Dixie and Bob. Why we bother, we don't know. It's apparent that those in the wrestling business will never learn from the past. We do, however, hold out hope that one day we, the authors of this book, will learn a lesson. Perhaps when the 20th anniversary edition of this book is digitally uploaded directly into your brain, we'll get smart and dedicate it to our wives and kids instead.